This screencast is going to go over changing fractions and decimals into each other. So fractions to decimals, decimals to fractions. As I said in class, or as you'll hear me say in class, if you can say the decimal, you can write the fraction. If you can say the fraction, you should be able to write the decimal. So just think about place value. Think about with place value, you have your tenths place, and then you have your hundredths place. Sometimes you'll even see a decimal that is 3 numbers long. So that also gives you your thousandths place. If we take a look at decimals, like I said, you want to think about place value. So most of the time we all know our places before the decimal to the left of the decimal, but it's really important that we know our places after the decimal. So once again, just to review, we have our tenths, our hundredths, and our thousandths. As I said, if you can say the decimal, you should be able to write the fraction. So if we take a look at this decimal up here, most times we say 3.6, but really this would be 3 6/10, because if we fill in our place values, you can see that the 3 lines up with the ones place and the 6 lines up with the tenths place. So we would write this as 3 6/10. If you have a mixed decimal, so a whole number in front, you're going to have a whole number to make it a mixed number, and then you would just write the decimal part as the fraction. Now, most times we want to make sure that our answers are in simplest form. So 3 6/10, we want to think about 3 is going to stay the same, but 6 and 10 can both be divided by 2 to get us down to 3 3/5. And this would be our fraction or mixed number equivalent to 3 6/10, will be 3 3/5. So take a look at numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Once again, say the decimal first, and then try writing the decimals as fractions in simplest form. So if you go ahead and take a look at number 1, you would say this as 0.3. 3 is in the tenths place, so it would be 3/10, and you would write it that way. This is already in simplest form. If you take a look at number 2, 64 hundredths is not in simplest form. So I'm going to go ahead and divide by 2. I get 32 over 50. Once again, not in simplest form. I'm going to divide again by 2. That's going to get me to 16 over 25. That is in simplest form. So 64 hundredths is really equal to 16 over 25 in simplest form. Looking at number 3, this would be 2 and, because that decimal point means and, 4/10. Once again, whole number is already in simplest form. I just need to simplify my fraction. So I'm going to divide by 2, and I would end up getting 2 2/5. Finally, 1 and 25 over 100, 1 and 25 hundredths. Need to simplify this. If you're thinking big picture, you could simplify this by dividing by 25. If not, you can always use your simp key on your calculator. You could have divided by 5 as well, and then you would have just needed to divide by 5 again. 25 divided by 5 is 1, 100 divided by 25 is 4. So 1 1/4 would be your final answer for number 4. Let's talk quickly about fractions. When you are changing a fraction into a decimal, you want to make sure that you are looking at the denominator first. So if you have a denominator that is a factor of 10 or 100 or 1000, then you can easily change the fraction into a decimal. So for example, if I give you the fraction, I don't know, 1/5, we know that 5 is a factor of 10, so I could multiply 5 times 2, and that would get me to 10, and then I would do the same thing to the top. It's like finding an equivalent fraction. 1 times 2 is 2. 2/10, if I can say it, I can write it as a decimal, so that will become 0.2, because 2/10, the 2 would need to fall in the tenths place. If I take a look at 3 3/5, once again, I have a denominator of 5, So I want to make sure that I can multiply that times something, so I can multiply that times 2, multiply 3 times 2. This would become 3 6/10. Once again, if I can say it, then I should be able to write it. The 3 would be out in front because we have a mixed number, so we're going to have a mixed decimal. 3 6/10, that 6 would go right in the tens place, so your final answer would then be 3.6. Once again, go ahead and try these. Look at your denominators first. Figure out, can I change them into 10, 100, or 1,000? And then find the decimal equivalent for each fraction. So if you take a look at number 1, you will see that I multiplied by 2, ended up getting 4/10, so I wrote that as 0.4. Number 2, I multiplied by 4 to get to 100, ended up getting 0.48 or 48 hundredths. Number 3, I ended up getting 0.62 or 62 hundredths because I multiplied by 2. And then finally, number 4, I multiplied by 25, got 75 over 100. I already knew that I would have a 2 in the front, so it became 2.75 or 2 75 hundredths. So just remember that when you are going from a fraction to a decimal, if you can change the denominator into a 10, 100, or 1,000, that's going to make your life a little bit easier. And going back to our decimals, if you can say the decimal, you can write the fraction. Just make sure that you are putting that into simplest form then.